It was a winter evening like any other, but I had received a cryptic message about an ancient Sacrow hidden deep within the forest. Despite my reservations, I felt compelled to uncover its secrets. I'd always been drawn to the unknown, the unexplained, and the macabre. As a historian and explorer, I'd spent years studying the dark lore of Thelma, a woman who'd lived in these very woods over a century ago. Her legacy was shrouded in mystery, and many believed she'd made a pact with forces beyond human comprehension. The message had been sent anonymously, but its words still lingered in my mind. The Sacrow awaits where shadows dance and darkness reigns. I knew then that I had to find out what it meant. The forest, already eerily quiet, seemed to be watching me, waiting for me to make my move. I packed my gear, loaded my camera, and set off into the darkness. The trees loomed above me, their branches creaking in the wind like skeletal fingers. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I pressed on, driven by an insatiable curiosity. As I walked deeper into the forest, the silence grew thicker, like a physical presence. I began to wonder if I'd made a terrible mistake, if Thelma's curse was real, and if I'd be next to succumb to its darkness. But still I pressed on, my heart pounding with anticipation. Little did I know, the night had only just begun, and it would change me forever. I pushed through the underbrush, my eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through the trees. The forest floor was a tapestry of decaying leaves and twigs, crunching beneath my feet with each step. My breath misted in the chill air as I climbed higher, the canopy above me slowly giving way to a sea of stars. The night sky was ablaze with a million pinpricks of light, but I barely registered them, my focus fixed on the path ahead. According to the map, the Sacrow should be within striking distance now. I'd spent hours poring over dusty tomes and crumbling scrolls, trying to piece together Thelma's story. It was said she'd made a pact with an ancient deity, trading her soul for dark powers that would ensure her immortality. The locals avoided this forest, whispering tales of strange rituals and human sacrifices. I didn't believe it, not entirely. But as I walked, the silence began to feel like a weight on my shoulders, pressing down on me with every step. My camera hung around my neck, ready to capture any sign of anomaly. I'd brought a small first aid kit just in case, and a water bottle to stay hydrated. The forest was vast, and I had no idea where I was or how far I'd come. Yet the trees seemed to close in around me, their branches tangling above my head like skeletal fingers. I quickened my pace, my heart beating faster with every step. Suddenly, the world seemed to slow down as if time itself was holding its breath. I stood still, listening for any sound, a rustle of leaves, a snap of twigs, anything that might break the silence. But there was nothing, only an oppressive quiet that made my skin crawl. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the feeling of unease. The silence was oppressive, but I told myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. I continued walking, my eyes scanning the forest floor for any sign of the Sacrow's presence. As I walked, I noticed that the trees seemed to be leaning in towards me, their branches tangling together above my head like skeletal fingers. I quickened my pace, feeling a growing sense of unease. Suddenly, I heard a faint rustling in the underbrush ahead. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart racing with anticipation. The rustling grew louder, and I could tell that whatever was making it was moving quickly through the forest. My hand instinctively went to my camera, as if it might capture some evidence of what was happening. As I watched, a figure emerged from the darkness. It was tall and gaunt, its features indistinct in the dim light. The figure moved with an unnatural gait, its limbs twisting and contorting in ways that seemed impossible for human bones. I felt a chill run down my spine as it passed within a few feet of me, its eyes fixed on some point beyond me. I tried to follow its gaze, but there was nothing to see. The figure vanished into the trees, leaving behind an unsettling feeling of being watched. I stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. But as I looked around, I realized that I was completely alone in the forest. There were no signs of the figure's presence, no footprints, no broken branches, nothing. It was as if it had never been there at all, or so I thought. The dense forest seemed to close in around me as I ventured deeper into the woods. The GPS on my phone led me further astray, but I pressed on, driven by curiosity. As the trees grew taller and the underbrush thicker, I began to feel like I was being herded towards some unknown destination. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows ahead of me. It was an old woman, dressed in tattered black robes that seemed to billow behind her like a dark cloud. Her face was twisted with age and malice, and her eyes gleamed with a malevolent light that made my blood run cold. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat as she regarded me with an unblinking stare. She reached out a bony hand and beckoned me closer, her fingers curled into a claw-like shape that sent shivers down my spine. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do, before taking a tentative step forward. The old woman's eyes flashed with approval as I drew nearer, and she reached out to touch my face with the tips of her bony fingers. "Welcome, child," she croaked in a voice that sent shivers down my spine. "I've been waiting for you." Her words were like ice water, but they seemed to stir something deep within me. I felt a jolt of recognition, as if I had stumbled into a place where memories lay hidden. The old woman's eyes seemed to bore into mine, and I saw flashes of images that didn't belong to me, rituals performed under moonlight, human sacrifices made in the dead of night, and dark incantations whispered into the wind. My mind reeled as I struggled to comprehend what I was seeing. Who was this old woman, and how did she know my name? As the old woman's grip on my face tightened, I felt myself being pulled into a world beyond my wildest imagination. The trees around us seemed to twist and writhe, their branches grasping like skeletal fingers. The air grew colder, heavy with an otherworldly presence that made my skin crawl. Suddenly, the old woman's eyes flashed bright red, and she spoke in a voice that was both ancient and eternal. "Behold, child," she cackled, her words dripping with malevolence. As she spoke, the trees parted to reveal a structure unlike anything I had ever seen. It was a twisted mass of branches and roots, pulsing with a dark energy that seemed to seethe and writhe like living flesh. The Sacrow. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I gazed upon its twisted form. It was a monolith, a temple, a prison all at once. The old woman's grip on my face relaxed and she stepped back, revealing the full majesty of the Sacrow. Its surface was etched with ancient runes that seemed to pulse with a dark power. I felt a strange connection to it, as if I had been drawn here for some reason I couldn't quite remember. The old woman cackled again, her eyes gleaming with malevolence. "You see, child," she said, "this is the heart of Thelma's legacy. This is where the darkness was born." As I gazed upon the Sacrow, I felt a presence stirring within me. It was as if I had been awakened to a power that lay dormant deep within my soul. The old woman's eyes flashed with approval. "You have the mark of Thelma on you," she said, her voice dripping with malice. "You are one of us now." As she spoke, the world around me began to change. The trees seemed to twist and writhe in agony, as if they were being consumed by some dark force. The air grew colder, and I felt myself being drawn towards the Sacrow. It was as if I had no choice but to succumb to its power. The darkness closed in around me like a shroud, suffocating me with its heavy weight. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease that had settled over me, but it only seemed to grow stronger. The old woman's words echoed in my mind. "You are one of us now." I felt a creeping sense of dread as I realized that I was trapped in this twisted world. The Sacrow loomed before me, its pulsing energy drawing me towards it like a moth to flame. As I approached, the air grew colder and the shadows deepened, twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to writhe and twist on the ground. I tried to run, but my feet felt heavy, as if rooted to the spot. The old woman's laughter echoed through the forest, sending shivers down my spine. "You'll never escape," she cackled. "The nightmares will consume you." And with that, the world around me began to unravel. I saw visions of dark rituals and human sacrifices, of blood-soaked altars and twisted creatures that defied explanation. The images were fragmented and disjointed, but they seemed to sear themselves into my mind like branding irons. I tried to cry out, but my voice was lost in the wind. The nightmares poured in, a torrent of terror that threatened to consume me whole. I stumbled through the forest, desperate to escape the darkness that pursued me. But every step felt like a trap, leading me deeper into the heart of madness. And then I saw her. Thelma herself, standing before me with eyes that burned like embers from hell. "Welcome home," she whispered, her voice like a rusty gate. "You'll never leave." As I gazed upon her face, I felt my mind slipping away, consumed by the horrors that lurked within. The darkness closed in around me, and everything went black. The sound of twigs snapping beneath my boots seemed amplified in the eerie silence. A faint, flickering light appeared on the horizon, Thelma's cabin. I approached it with a sense of trepidation, as if drawing closer would seal my fate. The cabin itself was a twisted monstrosity, its wooden boards weathered to a moss-covered gray that seemed to blend seamlessly into the surrounding trees. Smoke drifted lazily from the chimney, carrying the scent of burning incense and something else, something sweet and decaying. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I reached out to knock on the door. It swung open with an unholy ease, revealing a dimly lit interior that seemed to swallow me whole. The air inside was heavy with the stench of rot and decay, and I could feel the weight of Thelma's malevolent presence bearing down upon me. "Welcome home," she croaked, her voice like a rusty gate scraping against concrete. She beckoned me deeper into the cabin, her eyes glinting with a madman's gleam. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I should trust her or flee in terror. But something compelled me to follow her, to see where this twisted journey would lead. The interior of the cabin was a maze of dark corridors and cramped, cluttered rooms, each one filled with an assortment of macabre trinkets and forbidden knowledge. Thelma led me deeper into the heart of her lair, the air growing colder and more oppressive with every step. We finally arrived at a small, dimly lit chamber that seemed to be some sort of shrine. The walls were adorned with strange symbols and artifacts, each one telling a tale of bloodshed and sacrifice. At the center of it all stood an ancient tome, its cover bound in human skin and adorned with eyes that glowed like embers from hell. "This is where the madness begins," Thelma whispered, her voice dripping with malevolence. "Are you prepared to face what lies within?" As she spoke, the air around me seemed to thicken, as if reality itself was bending to accommodate some terrible truth. I felt my mind reeling, my grip on sanity tenuous at best. And yet, I knew that I had to see this through. For some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that Thelma's secrets held the key to unlocking the mysteries of my own troubled past. As I gazed upon the ancient tome, a creeping sense of dread began to spread through my veins. Thelma's eyes seemed to gleam with an unholy light as she reached out to touch its cover. "This is the key to unlocking your true potential," she hissed, her voice dripping with malice. "Are you ready to unleash the curse?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I should trust her or flee in terror. But something compelled me to nod, to surrender to the darkness that lurked within. Thelma's smile grew wider as she opened the book, releasing a musty scent that seemed to cling to my skin like a shroud. The words on the pages appeared to shift and writhe, like living serpents slithering across the parchment. I felt a cold sweat break out on my brow as Thelma began to read from the book, her voice weaving a spell of madness and despair. The air around me seemed to thicken, as if reality itself was bending to accommodate some terrible truth. I tried to step back, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. The words on the page seemed to sear themselves into my mind, burning away my sanity with every passing moment. I felt myself becoming lost in a labyrinth of madness, with Thelma as my guide. The curse took hold, its tendrils wrapping around my mind like a noose. I was consumed by visions of blood and gore, of twisted rituals and human sacrifices. The world around me dissolved into chaos, leaving only the sound of my own screams echoing through the void. And yet, even as I screamed, I knew that I was not alone. Thelma's laughter seemed to join mine, a cacophony of madness that threatened to consume us both. The curse took hold, its power coursing through my veins like liquid fire. I was no longer myself, but a vessel for the darkness that lurked within. And in that moment, I knew that I would never be free. The world around me had descended into chaos. The trees seemed to twist and writhe, their branches grasping for me like skeletal fingers. Thelma's laughter echoed through the forest, a mad cackle that sent shivers down my spine. I stumbled through the underbrush, desperate to escape the madness that had consumed me. But every step felt like a trap, leading me deeper into the heart of the forest. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches tangling together above my head like a canopy of darkness. I was lost, alone and abandoned in a world that had gone mad. The curse took hold, its power coursing through my veins like liquid fire. I could feel it burning away my sanity, leaving only a void of madness and despair. I stumbled forward, driven by a desperate need to escape the forest and find some semblance of peace. But every path led back to Thelma's lair, every door opening onto more twisted corridors and dark chambers filled with forbidden knowledge. I was trapped in a living nightmare, with no escape from the madness that had consumed me. And yet, even as I stumbled through the forest, I knew that I could not shake the feeling that Thelma was always one step behind me, waiting to pounce on my next mistake. The curse took hold, its power growing stronger with every passing moment. I was no longer myself, but a vessel for the darkness that lurked within. And in that moment, I knew that I would never be free. I stumbled through the forest, driven by a desperate need to escape the madness that had consumed me. Every step felt like a struggle, as if my legs were heavy with lead and my mind was clouded by a thick fog. Thelma's laughter echoed through the trees, a maddening cackle that seemed to follow me everywhere. I knew I couldn't keep running forever, but I didn't know where else to go. The forest seemed to stretch on forever, an endless expanse of twisted trees and dark shadows. I felt like I was being herded towards some unknown fate, with Thelma as my guide. As I walked, the trees began to close in around me, their branches tangling together above my head like a canopy of darkness. I stumbled, catching myself on a nearby tree trunk. My hands were bloody and dirty, stained with leaves and twigs. I looked up at the sky, and for a moment I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. A glimmer of light, shining through the trees like a beacon in the darkness. It was faint, but it gave me hope. Maybe there was a way out of this madness after all. I set off towards the light, my feet carrying me forward with a newfound sense of determination. Thelma's laughter grew louder, more urgent, and I knew that she would stop at nothing to keep me trapped in her web of madness. But I refused to give up. I kept moving, driven by a fierce determination to break free from the curse that had consumed me. And as I walked, the light grew brighter, illuminating a path through the darkness. It was my only hope. I pushed open the creaky door, calling out for anyone who might answer. The only response was the echo of my own voice off the walls, and the faint scent of decay wafting from beyond the threshold. I stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. Thelma's cabin was dark and foreboding, the air inside heavy with malevolent energy. I fumbled for the light switch, but it refused to work. The darkness seemed to writhe around me like a living thing, tendrils of shadow reaching out to snatch at my ankles. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the gloom. It was Thelma, her eyes blazing with an unholy light. Her skin was deathly pale, stretched taut over her cheekbones like parchment on a skull. She regarded me with a cold, calculating gaze, her lips curled into a snarl. "You shouldn't have come here," she hissed, her voice like a rusty gate scraping against concrete. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. Thelma took a step closer, her eyes flashing with malevolent intent. I could feel the curse emanating from her, a palpable force that threatened to consume me whole. I raised my hands, palms outwards, in a futile attempt to ward off the darkness. But it was too late. The door slammed shut behind me, plunging me into total darkness. And then Thelma's laughter erupted around me, a deafening cacophony of madness and despair. As the darkness closed in around me, I knew that I was staring into the face of pure terror. Thelma's laughter had become a living thing, wrapping itself around my mind like a shroud. I felt myself being pulled down into the depths of madness, with no escape from the horrors that lurked within. And yet, even as I succumbed to the darkness, I knew that there was one final act of defiance left to me. With a surge of adrenaline, I reached out and grabbed Thelma's hand, holding it tight in a desperate bid for control. The curse raged around us like a storm, but I stood firm, my grip on reality tenuous at best. Slowly, the laughter began to fade, replaced by an oppressive silence that hung over us like a pall. And then, in a voice that was almost, but not quite, my own, I spoke the words that had been building inside me for so long. "I will never let you win," I said, the words dripping with venom. Thelma's eyes flashed with surprise, and for a moment her grip on my hand faltered. It was all the time I needed. With a surge of strength, I wrenched my hand free, feeling the curse recoil in shock. And then, in an instant, everything went white. When I came to, I was lying on the forest floor, the sunlight warm on my face and the air crisp with the scent of pine. Thelma was nowhere to be seen, but I knew that she had left behind a parting gift, a curse that would haunt me for the rest of my days. But I also knew that I had broken free from her hold, that I had faced down the terror and emerged victorious. Or so it seemed.